Hey, how's it going? Jason here, and in this episode we're going to be talking about this oak I have right here. Alright, so this oak, I actually repotted it about 4 weeks ago. I have some footage that I'm going to go over in a little bit that sort of documented the process for repotting this oak. Now, the one thing that you always have to keep in mind with oaks is that they don't like to have their roots disturbed. So I took a lot of care into repotting this to make sure I wasn't disturbing the roots too much, trying to keep as much of the root ball as possible while still trying to fit it into this pot right here. So you notice that this tree is actually in a shorter pot than I normally use. But for the oak, since you want to not disturb the roots as much as possible, you want to leave it alone, I went with a bigger pot so that I didn't have to remove as much of the root ball and didn't have to cut as many roots. About 4 weeks later, this thing is doing fine. It's pushing out a bunch of new leaves right here, lots of new foliage. You can see right in there. It's pushing out a bunch of new leaves. So I know that the repot was successful. So just keep that in mind when you're repotting your oaks. Just take care to not overwork the roots. Try to leave them alone as much as possible, and then your tree will do fine. So now that this tree is in this pot, I'm going to go into maintenance mode. Originally, before it actually made it into this pot, I was growing out a couple branches here, which have grown out by now. So I've cut them back already. I've cut them back so I can start to ramify these lower branches a little bit. Maybe bring this down a little bit. But I can already see that on this side, I'm starting to get a lot of new buds and a lot of small branches here that are going to basically fill in this tree really nicely with basically enough leaves to cover this area. Now what I'm going to do is also I'm going to grow out the leaves and branches a little bit longer so that I can match this pot a little bit better. Maybe come out to about here on both sides. If the pot is about 80% the width of the tree, I'm going to go out to about here on the foliage. So I'm just going to let these grow out. As you can tell, I've got one branch right here just to start the process. Now, in terms of care, things you want to keep in mind with the oaks is that they really like to be well watered. You can use a little bit of a more organic mix when you're putting this into the pot. For this one, you can see I've still got my aggregate right here. I've got my lava, but I've got a lot of peat moss in there as well. Just so it always stays nice and moist. Now, other than repotting, the other thing you want to keep in mind when working on your oaks is wiring. The branches on the oaks are very brittle. They're also very delicate. So when you apply a wire, it can damage the cambium really easily. So if you're not too careful, you actually will lose that branch. Luckily, oaks, especially in the early spring, you can cut them back. Right when you see those buds start to appear, you can cut them back. You can cut them back really hard, and you're going to get shoots coming out. So as long as you haven't killed the entire branch when you're wiring and you accidentally break it, you will be able to basically develop a new one. But of course, the ultimate goal is to not have to do that. So just take some care when you're wiring, and then you should be okay. Now, in terms of fertilizer, what you want to use is just a general balanced mix. You don't have to do something that's too high in nitrogen. You don't have to do something that's too high in phosphorus just because there's no flowers on the yolk. So basically just use something balanced and then just feed it from the spring to the fall evenly every month, and then scale back in the winter. Now there's also, people like to defoliate their oaks, and I think that's totally fine if the tree is healthy. You can defoliate your oaks. You basically in the late summer, you can cut off some of these leaves and it'll come back again. And usually you will get some smaller leaves out of that. So it's kind of a nice way of controlling the growth so that these things don't get gigantic and get leggy. Defoliating is something that you can do to manage the growth on your oak. I think oaks are great trees. I love that there's so many varieties of it. This is a Quercus agrifolia or coast live oak, but that's just one of them. There's tons of them, and they all have different leaf shapes. They're great. We have a cork oak that's going to be going up on our site soon, and that's really cool because the sort of the bark on the tree and the trunk is corked, which looks very cool. This one's not, but it's still, the leaves on this still look really nice. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. Otherwise, give me a like if you thought the video was helpful, and of course subscribe if you'd like to see some more. Thanks for watching.